I want to introduce a new subject, Phil. This is about the affirmative model of disability. This is because I saw two people we know and love, Mick Scarlett and Sam Renk, who were discussing this on Twitter. And Mick Scarlett is a very firm advocate of the social model. And Sam said, well, I quite like the affirmative model. And I was like, oh, do I know enough about this? I found an article. It's Disability Arts Online. This is 2009. And this model originally kicked in around 2000 from John Swain and Sally French, the academics, and they were doing in disability in society.
Yeah.
So we know there are lots of models of disability, the social model being a big one, medical model, charity model, tragedy model. This affirmative model, the starting point was even if the social model was put into practice and all the barriers around were removed to give equal access to employment, inclusive education, and so on, it would still be possible for impairment to be seen as a personal tragedy and for disabled people to be regarded and treated as victims of misfortune. So everything is accessible. So the disabling bit is gone. Unfortunately, you still have this disability. So if the social model was the reaction to the medical model, Swain and French were saying we need something to address the charity tragedy model. And this is, you could say, it's expressed in the voices of people who say, deafness is normal for me. I wouldn't want to be anything else but deaf. Or I've been blind since birth. Why would I want to change? This is who I am. I have Down syndrome, but I don't suffer from it. I have it. This is just part of me. There's a little allusion to this. Is it important as a model? The article I'm quoting from, it says, because very often still disabled people find themselves under pressure to keep quiet about their impairment, to try and assimilate as if their impairments weren't part of who they were. They're just a minor part of, who they are, and they regard them as embarrassing hindrances to overcome. Um, this article says we didn't get a real true outline of what the affirmative model is. I'm going to stop in 1 second and let you come back in it. Um, the idea is it a bit of a Pollyanna model? So it shouldn't be, but it's like, well, the social model gets rid of all the barriers, and I love myself, and everything's great. And we know that's not true as well, because disability is about oppression. Having an impairment is not always wonderful. There's pain, there's limitation, there's darkness, frustration, hurt, and isolation. Anyhow, what do you think as a concept of this affirmative model?
Um, I I read the article that you're quoting from, and I got quite excited to start with, and then I thought, hang on, when I'd read it all and revisited it, I still don't think I quite understand what it is. I don't think they've spelt out in quite the way that I hope they might, or the writer might, because he's a PhD. He did a PhD on this, didn't he?
Yeah.
The writer, and he interviewed 16 people. I'll come back to that in a minute. But he interviewed 16 disabled people of various hues and experiences and so on. And he clearly did some serious work around that. But what he hasn't done for me is to say what it actually is. So I'm still left a bit sort of hanging. Now, having said that, he sticks very firmly to this kind of idea that the impairment that you and I might have invokes in other people and possibly in ourselves feelings of pity and, difference, negative differences, those kinds of things. Now, that's fine. I don't have any argument with that. But he never goes on to say how the affirmation model, for me at least, and maybe I'm missing something, you can help me, how the affirmation model helps reverse that or stop that happening. And he makes, I think, several statements, which in a minute we'll look at again, which kind of lose some of the credibility for me of what he actually is saying.
Um, just for clearance, this I will put the link up to the article.
Yeah.
The chap was doing the PhD. Colin Cameron is his name, and he was saying, "I want to do the PhD because I don't think Swain and French gave us clarity about what it is. They kind of described this loose term, and we didn't have enough definition. There is a book that came out in 2009 called Disability on Equal Terms, I believe it's called. Yeah, Disability on Equal Terms, which I didn't buy yet. You're right. This is an article about an article, so it's kind of two or three hands. If the essence is, we've talked about this a million times, where we've said social model solves all these barriers, they're all removed. However, I have condition A, I can't get around my house, this is miserable and difficult. Or there might be me and you who might go or say, well, this is who we are. I don't want to be different. I like being me with all the things. So the impairment almost is the impairment being a negative word goes out the window. We go, no, it's a positive thing. It's a useful, interesting, diverse thing. It makes me richer and different and engaging and all that stuff.
Now that's very true, and that comes very clearly through in the article. And it's interesting you mentioned Mick Scarlett and Sam Renk being the two kind of conversationalists about this, because what we haven't said or at least I don't think we've said, is this article is written from a disability arts point of view. So it's kind of saying disabled artists, people in the creative world of art and so on, whatever form that takes, should be saying more about the reason their art is so good and so different is because of their disability and what they get from that. It makes them, so it's not a negative difference, it's a positive difference. And he does say that in the article very clearly. This is a positive difference. I am not negatively different. What he doesn't do for me is to talk the 16 people that he interviewed. I chair the Research Institute for Disabled Consumers. 16 people ain't going to cut it for me when it comes to whether this is a universal truth in a sense. But it is a PhD, and he's done his work thoroughly, so I'm not disputing that. What's missing is those people who in their 50s, 40s, and whatever become disabled. And how do they feel about it? And what do their internal world look like? For you, I was born with Down syndrome. So this is what I am. And, you can go take a running jump. I like being who I am. It's fine. But if I'm 50 and I suffer a brain injury and I can no longer function in the way I used to before, how do I feel about that? Is that a tragedy? I think it is, actually. I'll use that word. Yeah, I do.
Phil.
I think that individual, were they sitting in their car that day going, God, you know what? I really hope happens to me today as I have a
lucky me.
And I end up. So I think it's not accurate to say that people don't experience the onset of a disability as a tragedy. It's what happens after that gets more interesting. Well, and we do know people, of course we do, who say, my disability gave me a completely different view on the world I live in, and I've used that to my advantage in an artistic way or creative way, whatever. So,
and there's plenty of, when I say plenty, probably two people who have said, before I was a couch potato and I'd eat my crisps and I did nothing. I then became disabled and I started doing sports and activities, and now I'm healthier than I've ever been. So you're right, there is this opening up that it's such a significant change of someone's life, but it is where they go. And I suppose what we're kind of saying is, we're venturing into Liz Truss, the Equalities Minister, bit about how much is the person's character going to inform this, and how much is an impairment or disability going to inform this. So I'm kind of saying they could go both ways. I suppose I even struggle with it when you see someone who's had a profound impairment. They go, "I love this. It's been the best thing that's ever happened to me." Even I go, "Oh, come on." But I suppose what we're saying is it might take time to adjust. We go back to social model to say, let's get rid of all the barriers that are blocking your return to inclusion of society. But the affirmative model is also trying to go, and I just thinking this as I say it, my dad had a stroke. He said the most infuriating thing was, for 2 or 3 years after, people go, "You're all right, you better take it steady, that must have been difficult," and people pitying him. He said it wasn't the consequence of me having the condition that was difficult, it was other people bloody limiting me.
Now that is very much at the essence of what he's talking about, isn't it? It's the way society treats you. So you have this thing happen. Society then pities you, feels whatever it feels for you, and you therefore feel that for yourself. And bear in mind that before you had the accident or whatever it was, you'd been conditioned for 40 odd years to see disabled people in that way. So now you become a disabled person. And what's your default position? Oh, I want people to feel sorry for me because that's how it should work. You know, people feel pity for me. Your dad's a good example, isn't he, of saying that's not what helped me. What the affirmative model doesn't tell me is, what do we do about it then? What's the road out of this for society as a whole?
So, and I need to defend, this is an article about a concept that wasn't fully formed. This is 2009, I found this blooming thing. What we need to do is get back to Sam Rank and say, where you at on this? There's something very nice, and I do see the youngsters who are saying, I am what I am. I'm not going to defend it or hide it, take it or leave it. And I think that's because of you and me and other disabled people who've gone out there and said 20 years ago, 10 years ago, look, this isn't my problem. This is your problem. All that sort of. So they've come into a society that started to move and to change, and there is no shame, and that's immensely powerful and brilliant.
And I don't have any arguments with his Cameron, isn't it? The concepts he's outlining in that way, I agree with him.
But you need
What
the
I don't get is, and you've made that point very well, that what I don't get is, okay, so what then? What we're
well,
going to do then?
I mean,
So let's invent it. Let's you and I define what the affirmative model is.
you see, this is why it works so well. I was saying there's a lot of criticism, Phil, but not a lot of ideas I'm hearing from you. I was kind of, but why don't you, in your vaccinated, perfect world, come up with some ideas for society?
Well, I read the article. I read the article, and what I wanted, which, to be fair, you've explained it was
It's not there.
Yeah, I wanted to read something that was going to say to me, if you, because what the social model did was give me a route map. It said, this is what's wrong. This is what should be done about it. We should challenge, we should remove barriers, we should re-educate people. You and I have spent the last 20 odd years plus meeting non-disabled employers and others and saying, this is not the way it should be. And most of the time, that group have heard us and have changed the way they go around things. Now, the affirmative model equivalent of the social model is what? What do I go out and do to help pitying people stop pitying?
Yeah, and the brilliance, but also I think a fault of the social model is it was so damn easy to grasp. It was so broad, it's so clever. This one, if it does counteract the charity tragedy model, and I'm really pleased there is something, because people conveniently forgot the charity tragedy model because half of them work for one. So they, were quite happy to let it go, and I've always bugged me that one. So the fact that there is a counterpoint is really helpful. The guy, Colin, was doing his PhD to say, I need a proper frame of reference. The book then came out after. We would need to do some more research, or listeners, including Sam and others. Give us some of your top 5 things. How do we get to the essence of this? And then, we can talk about it again. But it feels strong and good to me. I just, as you say, we want the tools.
Yeah, I mean, there's a line here, a quote, just a quote. Again, there might be more access to mainstream culture than there was 10, 15, 20 years ago, but disabled people are still treated with pitying condescension, polite discomfort, furtive, embarrassed glances, and outright hostility. We might be able to get in now, but we're certainly still not. We're still made to feel unwelcome. Now, you and I are not going to disagree with that. I think there's a lot of that about. What it doesn't do, that paragraph, is answer this question. So what about people who have not got a visible impairment then? See, that paragraph addresses people who are visibly different. It doesn't address, we've had this conversation loads of times, those who are non-visibly different. Now, what he talks about in the article is the way we oppress ourselves. So, if I become disabled, I oppress myself by saying, I can't do anything anymore. It's all over for me. Da, 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 da. So that does lend itself to the affirmative model. But he doesn't say what I as an individual should do about that. And I think what his basic premise is that there is a route out of that if you belong to the arts and you hang out with other disabled people, that peer support stuff he does talk about. So it's not, I'm not saying there aren't some really good, interesting stuff in here. There is, but there are big gaps.
And that's the point. He's saying that. I think we have to leave the big questions you say hanging in terms of the non-visible. Again, be lovely to hear it. I think they are by default. They're part of this because it says about the visible disabled who deliberately try and ignore or try and assimilate or try and pretend it's an embarrassing minor thing. Well, if you've got something that's not visible, you may well be doing that already. The flip for them is to be able to say, yes, I've got condition A, you can't see it, but it gives me some limitation, but it also enhances my life because of XYZ. It's seeing the positive, not just the negative.
Hmm.
I can see a change concept. We should stop this subject, by the way. We need to move on. But I'm thinking of a context. Growing up, seeing people with dwarfism on television felt very awkward because of the roles that they were being portrayed in and the embarrassment. And then last week, this shows my progression. I did a tweet that really deserved to go viral. I think it got 3 likes. Um, I saw an article in Reuters and it said scientists have discovered dwarf giraffes.
Oh, I
Um,
saw that.
and this has stunned the scientific world. And I just went, meh, because that's kind of, I think, oh, guys, so what? Dwarf giraffes, get over it, big deal. And that for me is partly affirmative modeling. Of course, there is. We have dwarf people, we have dwarf giraffes, we have dwarf plants, we have da da da.
What about that giraffe saying, so where are my people? Is he the only, is she the only small giraffe? I mean, I don't know.
Also, it's hard to find bonsai trees in some of these African plains so they can eat. That's a really old gag. I can't believe I'm self-deprecating like this.
So
Yes,
it's work in
okay.
progress, the affirmative model. Is that what we're saying? It's work in progress.
It certainly is. And for those giraffes, their society may not have developed enough. I'm making judgments about giraffes here. Us as human beings, we're sentient. Yeah, okay. What? You still there? Anyone there?
I did find the dwarf giraffe story very interesting,
But you
actually.
didn't like it.
Well, I read it in the context that this was unusual. I read it a bit like discovering a new breed of ant.
But it doesn't count unless someone likes it. I don't exist,
Oh, you
remember?
mean you?
Yeah,
Here we're
like the tweet.
always you, isn't it? It's always about you.
Social media, if you don't like it, I don't exist. There's no point in me posting anymore. I'm coming off it all. All right.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
It must have been you that posted it, and I saw it through that route. But it was bloody funny. This little dwarf hopping about, and the first thing I thought was, where are all the other ones that don't ever get big?
If this comes back, it wasn't. What was funny? It's not funny just being a dwarf giraffe.
No, my joke was,
Oh,
where are my people?
yeah.
Where are my other hanging out, in quotes, disabled giraffes?
Uh,
No. I mean, have we saying there's never been a small giraffe before?
there is the Restricted Giraffe Association and Little Giraffe UK.
I'm still recording this.
Yeah, I know you.